Hey, Chris Ferrone here. So, one of the biggest questions I get all the time is what is happening with social consumption? And by social consumption, I of course mean, smoking weed, cannabis, whatever you want to call it, in a public venue. So, there are different ways this could work, and I'll get into how Massachusetts is breaking down the law. But this is a really interesting topic. Really, cannabis, not all dispensaries are doing well right now. It's something that people have been waiting for a long time. At the same time, people are saying, well, I can kind of smoke weed behind any bar that I'm at. I could go outside of a restaurant. What's the point of these regulations? So those are things that the state is basically working through right now. I'm not really here to pass judgment on the overall thing. I'm here to talk about one specific thing really called cooling down areas. But we'll get to that in a second. I don't like to just hit people out of nowhere. So as far as social consumption, it looks like right now, by the way, they're in the final writing phases of the regulations. And last week there was a hearing. That's what we're going to be talking about. But what you really need to know, the big framework here is that there are three basic types of licenses. And I broke this down last week, but we'll do it real quick. The first is a hospitality on-site consumption license. That's for newer existing non-cannabis businesses to host consumption activities in partnership with dispensaries. So say there's like a bowling alley that wants to be a cannabis bowling alley. I know I always use this example. It's because I want to smoke some weed and bowl. But basically, they can team up. That would be under that license class. The next would be supplemental on-site consumption. That's like, so a lot of dispensaries, as you know, they have these huge spaces. They don't use the whole thing. They've kind of been planning. Maybe they want to do a social consumption eventually. This is the opportunity. That's the class for them. And then finally is the event organizer classification. That's for qualifying marijuana establishments to organize and host temporary consumption events. So that'll be kind of like, almost like pulling a liquor license to have an event when you don't have a full-time liquor license. So in addition to those classes, there's also going to be different types of consumption areas, indoor, outdoor. And with these regulatory meetings, the things that people are trying to figure out, a lot of it is around, for example, what is the amount of cannabis you're going to be able to get. And I'll get to that one in a second. But also just things like, there's a million, you can imagine how many things are coming into play. Basically, a lot of the things that they dealt with alcohol regulations, but it's cannabis, and there's a huge stigma still, unfortunately. So there's other kinds of considerations that are being taken into account. But the whole ordeal is far from simple. Among other catches, there's extensive rules governing indoor smoking areas, including detailed requirements on ventilation systems and stuff like that. But today we have, by the way, this story we have on Talking Joints Memo. Check it out. I'm going to post it in the comments by Dana Forsythe. Thanks to Dana for checking out the hearing last week, really holding it down for us, covering a lot of Cannabis Control Commission stuff. But this one was interesting. People really came to give some reality, which it's interesting because I think that for the most part, the commissioners really understand reality. A lot of them have done, or some of them have actually done the research. They've gone out, even visited other states, but there are still some things in these regulations, of course, to appease various parties, as law enforcement always has its a seat at the table, unfortunately, with these things. But there are some things in these regulations where potential stakeholders, people who might open these establishments, are coming and they're saying, no, it's a non-starter. And what they're also saying is that these are some of these rules and regulations, the proposed regulations, are making it so that this will not be profitable. So, like, what's the point? And on top of that, there is a 60-month exclusivity period, that's 5 years, of course, for social equity licensees, just like there were on some other license types, like delivery. And what people are saying is, why is this the group? This is a group of individuals that doesn't always have as much funding. It's hard to come by funding. Why are they the guinea pigs? Why are they going to be? Why is there going to be a new license class with really inadequate regulations that's going to hobble these businesses early on? So one of those things that people really complained about was the proposed allotment. So current draft regulations for social consumption would allow no more than 3.5 grams of flour to be bought and no more than 2 servings of infused products that do not exceed 10 milligrams of THC. All right, so come on. We're talking, so we're going to go there and get, I know for some people that does the trick, but for a savage like me, it just doesn't work. It's just not there. And I'm not trying, it's not a cool thing. This is not me being unreasonable, because frankly, there are people who testified to this. One of them was Lisa Moriello. from Paper Crane Cannabis. We've profiled the team over there, her husband Bowie and her. They saying they, this is something they would want to do. They have a great outdoor grow. It's beautiful out in Hubbardston. They'd want to do something where people could come, make a tasting experience, like a winery, like a vineyard, right? But they're not going to do it under these circumstances, as I interpret what they're saying, because some of these rules are just too restrictive, and this is going to be a costly enterprise. This is going to cost somebody a lot of money to open one of these things, just like any other cannabis business. So let's see what happens. So, well, some people don't want to see what happens. They want to try to, affect the regulations first. So the big thing that everybody was talking about the other day during the hearing, the most contentious issue came around cooling down areas. Now, I can't stress enough how insane this is. It's exactly as it sounds. Like, this is like a box, a room that you would get put in, apparently, in order to cool down, in order to relax, and let's see how they put it. A consumer would spend time to allow the effects of consumption to dissipate. Now, I know you're probably sitting there thinking, they don't have this at bars. People, especially out in the suburbs, and I never got this, people just drink, get out, drive home. Obviously, a number of things wrong with that, but most importantly, the hypocrisy now here is just unbelievable. So there's already this kind of assault on stone driving without the adequate research, as far as I'm concerned, necessary to implement some of the laws and regulations on that front. But now they're really basically what a lot of people are saying, and I fully agree, they're really going to hurt these businesses out the gate, or really prevent a lot from even opening. With something like this, they're going to stick everyone. So some people testified against this. A lot of people did, from what I understand. Former Boston City Councilor Tito Jackson did. We have a comment from Ethan Voigt. I believe that's how you pronounce that last name, Ethan, who's been a long-time event organizer. And here's the quote. I really enjoyed this one. Social consumption is happening now in spaces that few were mentioned earlier, and then all over the place, okay? So he's saying, people were mentioned. Every bar, you could go out back and smoke a joint. The security guard won't yell at you, he said. This is what he testified. So to make an opportunity for these licenses to do it in a regulated environment, they're competing with bars, right? And what a bar does, Ethan said, their cooling down period is from 1:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. And he said a cooling down period should look like a taco truck outside of the establishment that's allowed to operate late in the city, not some room that you have to sit in and feel like a baby. And I can't stress enough, by the way, one of the reasons we don't have social consumption already was because the initial law, the way that the rules were written initially, were just completely ridiculous. I think it was like vaping only, literally. There was just a total non-starter. And yeah, we've moved forward a little bit, and we're closer to getting to actually having these establishments if people open them. But they're still, I think what people were really trying to call out the other day, still unreasonable. And there's a couple other regulations. I won't get into them. I already talked for a while. But this is all stuff, this is happening right now. So if this is something that interests you, if you're someone who might want to own one of these places, don't sit on the sidelines. This is the time. For all the flaws of the Cannabis Control Commission, I can tell you, they really do listen to a lot of this stuff, especially on this topic. They don't know a lot about it, and they're willing to admit that. Nobody knows a lot about this topic. Some of the places that, as I mentioned last time, that the Cannabis Control Commission visited, there's a place in Las Vegas, have already closed. So this is a difficult, challenging business. It's got to be done right. Glad to see some people stepping up, but cooling down areas, my friends, a total non-starter. So check out the article by Dana, and we'll have it in the comments. See you soon.